It was a bright morning at Arlington National Cemetery. The sun was shining, the air was calm, and visitors from many countries quietly walked around taking pictures of the white marble stones that stood in perfect lines. The atmosphere was peaceful and respectful, except for one man named Bradley Turner. Bradley was a tourist from New York. He had come to Washington, D.C. for the weekend and heard that the tomb of the unknown soldier was a popular place to visit. But to him it was just another stop on his travel list. He was the kind of person who liked attention and often made fun of things he didn't understand. With sunglasses on and a phone in his hand, he looked more like someone going to a concert than someone visiting a place of honor. As the time for the changing of the guard approached, the crowd gathered quietly. Everyone could feel the seriousness of the moment. The tomb guard marched back and forth in perfect rhythm. Each step was slow, strong, and precise. The sharp click of his boots echoed through the open space. Every movement carried purpose and discipline. But while everyone stood still, Bradley kept talking loudly to his friend, laughing and making jokes. "Man, look at this guy," he said, recording the guard on his phone. "He's just walking back and forth. People are acting like it's magic or something." Some people turned to look at him, clearly annoyed, but he didn't care. A veteran, sitting in a wheelchair near the front, gently turned toward him and said, "Son, you might want to keep it down." "This place deserves your respect," Bradley smirked. "Relax, old man. I'm just having fun." The veteran shook his head slowly but said nothing more. The crowd grew even quieter as the guard stopped in the center of his path. The soldier turned sharply, his movements perfect, and his voice carried across the area as he said the well-known command. "It is requested that everyone maintain silence and respect." The crowd instantly froze. Every whisper stopped. Cameras were lowered. The sound of the wind was the only thing left, everyone except Bradley. Feeling embarrassed that the soldier had basically called him out, Bradley rolled his eyes. He said loudly enough for others to hear, "Oh, come on. He thinks he's a robot or something." His friend whispered nervously, "Dude, stop." Everyone's looking, but Bradley wanted attention. He took a few steps forward, trying to get a closer look. The guard continued marching, ignoring him. The crowd watched in silence, feeling the tension rise. Bradley smirked again. "Let's see if he's really that serious," he said quietly. And in one foolish, thoughtless move, he lightly tapped the guard's shoe with his foot. It wasn't a hard kick, more like a childish act meant to get a reaction. But that single moment changed everything. The sound of his shoe touching the guards made a sharp tap that echoed in the silence. The crowd gasped. A few people stepped back. A woman covered her mouth. The air turned heavy as if time itself had stopped. The tomb guard instantly halted mid-step. He turned sharply to face Bradley, his expression firm and unshaken. The movement was so quick and precise that Bradley took a step backward in surprise. The soldier's eyes locked onto his, and cold, steady, and filled with quiet authority. In a deep, commanding voice, the guard said, "Do not disrespect the tomb of the unknowns." There was no shouting, no anger, just calm strength that made every word hit harder. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He could feel everyone staring at him. His heart raced as his foolish grin faded. Two military police officers who had been standing nearby immediately walked toward him. "Sir, step aside, please," one of them said firmly. Bradley stuttered. I didn't mean anything. I was just—" "Sir," the officer repeated, "please step aside." The crowd watched in complete silence as Bradley was escorted away from the area. His friend followed nervously behind him, whispering, "Man, what were you thinking?" As they left, the guard calmly returned to his post, resuming his march as if nothing had happened. The ceremony continued with the same perfect discipline, a reminder that honor does not bend for anyone's carelessness. A few minutes later, the crowd began to whisper softly again. People were shaken by what they had just witnessed. The same veteran who had tried to warn Bradley earlier leaned toward a nearby family and said quietly, "That soldier stands there, rain or shine, day and night, every hour of the year. He guards the unknown heroes who gave their lives for their country." What that man did wasn't just rude, it was deeply disrespectful. His words carried weight. A young boy standing beside him asked, "Why does the guard keep walking even when it's raining or snowing?" The veteran smiled gently. Because duty doesn't end when the weather gets bad. These guards make a promise to watch over the fallen no matter what. It's about respect, discipline, and love for their country. The little boy nodded, now understanding the meaning behind the guard's steady steps. Meanwhile, Bradley was taken aside for questioning. He realized quickly that what he thought was a small joke had serious consequences. The officers explained to him that interfering with a tomb guard or disrupting the ceremony could lead to legal trouble. They asked him to hand over his video recordings. For the first time that day, Bradley didn't argue. His hands trembled slightly as he complied. As he sat on a bench outside the visitor area, waiting for the process to end, he could still hear the faint echo of the guard's boots in the distance. The same sound that had seemed boring to him earlier now carried a different meaning, one of discipline, honor, and silent strength. He lowered his head, realizing how foolish he had been. What had started as a small act of arrogance had turned into a powerful lesson, one that was only beginning to unfold. Bradley sat quietly on a wooden bench near the security office of Arlington Cemetery. His earlier arrogance had disappeared completely. The officers who had spoken to him were polite but firm. They didn't yell or threaten him, but their tone carried seriousness. For the first time that day, Bradley felt small and embarrassed. He kept replaying that moment in his head, the sharp turn of the tomb guard, the echo of his boots stopping, and that deep, calm voice saying, "Do not disrespect the tomb of the unknowns." Those words kept ringing in his ears. One of the officers returned and handed back his phone, saying, "We've deleted the video. You're free to go, but you need to understand. What you did was not only disrespectful, it could have been treated as a serious violation. These soldiers are guarding something sacred. This isn't a show for entertainment." Bradley nodded slowly. I didn't realize it was that serious," he said in a quiet voice. The officer replied, "Most people don't, until they see what it really means." With that, the officer left him to think. Bradley sat for a while longer, staring down at his shoes. For the first time, he felt ashamed of how he had behaved. The laughter, the mocking, the careless attitude. It all seemed childish now. As he slowly walked back toward the visitor area, he noticed the people around him speaking softly, their faces calm and respectful. Nobody was laughing or joking. Some stood with their hands folded. Some wiped away quiet tears as they looked at the endless rows of white headstones. Bradley felt out of place among them, like he had walked into a room full of respect while carrying the weight of foolishness on his shoulders. Near the entrance, he saw the same elderly veteran he had brushed off earlier. The old man was sitting quietly in his wheelchair looking at the tomb. For a moment, Bradley hesitated. Then he gathered the courage to walk over. "Sir," he said softly, "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't understand what this place really means." The veteran looked at him kindly. "Son," he said, "most people don't at first. But you saw today that this place isn't just about soldiers walking back and forth. It's about sacrifice and respect for those who gave everything." Bradley nodded, still feeling the sting of guilt. The veteran continued, "That guard you saw doesn't stop walking no matter the weather. Rain, snow, or heat, they keep marching. Every single step has meaning. They do it for those who can't stand anymore, for those who never came home." Bradley was silent for a long time. He could feel the weight of the veteran's words pressing on his heart. "I really messed up," he said finally. The veteran smiled faintly. "What matters now is what you learn from it." The wind blew gently through the trees as they both sat quietly for a moment. The sound of the guard's boots echoed again from a distance, steady, sharp, and strong. A tour guide nearby began speaking softly to a group of students. Bradley listened from where he stood. "The tomb guard's duty never ends," the guide said. "They serve 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, even during hurricanes or snowstorms. Each guard goes through months of training. They memorize everything. The names of the battles engraved on the tomb, the history behind it, and the meaning of every step they take." The students listened with wide eyes. "They even count their steps," the guide continued. "They walk 21 steps down the mat, pause for 21 seconds, then turn and walk 21 steps back, all to symbolize the highest military honor, the 21-gun salute." Bradley was amazed. He had stood there earlier, mocking something he didn't even understand. Now as he listened, his heart filled with quiet respect. A little boy from the group raised his hand and asked, "Do they ever take a break?" The guide smiled. "Only when another guard replaces them. But even then they prepare for the next shift. Their duty is an honor, not just a job." The boy nodded thoughtfully. Bradley felt something change inside him. He thought about how he had traveled the world, always looking for fun and excitement, but never for meaning. He realized that real strength wasn't loud or boastful. It was silent, disciplined, and full of purpose. Like the soldier who had stood in front of him without fear or anger, only calm dignity. Later that afternoon, as he walked through the cemetery paths, he noticed the names and dates carved on the headstones. Some were from wars he had only read about in history books. Some had no names at all, just the words "known only to God." It hit him then. The tomb of the unknown soldier wasn't just about one grave. It represented thousands, maybe millions, of brave people who gave up their lives without anyone knowing their names. The guard wasn't just protecting marble. He was guarding memories, sacrifices, and stories that the world must never forget. Bradley stopped at a small bench overlooking the field. The afternoon sun was slowly fading, and a golden glow spread across the endless rows of white stones. He sat there quietly thinking. For the first time in a long while, he felt humbled. He thought about the guard's voice, the veteran's words, and the young student's learning with respect. It all blended into one powerful message. Honor is not about being seen. It's about remembering. As the day ended, Bradley walked to the main gate. Before leaving, he turned around for one last look. The tomb guard was still there, marching with perfect precision. Each step echoed through the air, steady and proud. Bradley whispered to himself, "He didn't need to shout at me. His silence taught me more than words ever could." He left the cemetery quietly, without the usual excitement of a tourist. But inside him something had shifted. The lesson had begun to take root, and it was one he would carry for the rest of his life. The next morning, Bradley woke up early in his hotel room, but he didn't feel like his usual self. Normally, he would scroll through his phone, check messages, and plan where to eat next. But today, his mind kept returning to that image. The tomb guard's steady walk, the veteran's calm words, and the silence that had followed his foolish act. He couldn't shake the guilt. It sat heavy on his chest like a stone. He knew he had to do something to make things right, not because anyone told him to, but because his heart wouldn't rest otherwise. So instead of going to the museum or cafe he had planned to visit, he decided to return to Arlington Cemetery. This time he went alone. He left his phone in his pocket and promised himself he wouldn't record or talk. He just wanted to see the ceremony again, the right way. When he arrived, the morning crowd was already gathered. The air was crisp and quiet. He stood near the back, feeling almost nervous. But this time he didn't want attention. He wanted to listen and understand. As the tomb guard began his march, Bradley watched every step carefully. Each movement looked stronger and more meaningful than before. The guard's uniform was spotless, his posture straight, his eyes focused. Every click of the boot, every pause, it all looked perfect. The crowd remained silent. Even small children stood still, sensing the importance of the moment. Bradley felt something warm rise in his chest. Admiration. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing so disciplined and full of respect. When the ceremony ended, people began to walk away quietly. Bradley stayed for a while, just standing there. He didn't want to leave. He wanted that silence to last longer. A volunteer guide noticed him standing alone and walked over. The man was middle-aged, wearing a simple uniform with a badge that said Volunteer Historian. "Beautiful ceremony, isn't it?" The guide said kindly. Bradley nodded. "It really is." "I didn't understand it before," the guide smiled. "Most people don't the first time. But once you do, it changes the way you look at everything." They began to talk. Bradley told him the truth, about how he had acted the day before, how he had disrespected the ceremony without realizing what it stood for. He admitted he felt deeply ashamed. The guide didn't look angry. Instead, he said, "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. You're not the first person who came here not understanding, but the important thing is that you learned something." Bradley sighed. "I wish I could take it back." The guide looked thoughtful. "You can't change yesterday, but you can make sure tomorrow is better. If you'd like, I can introduce you to someone, a retired tomb guard who volunteers here sometimes. He loves sharing his experience with visitors." Bradley agreed immediately. They walked together to a small office near the visitor center. Inside sat an older man with a calm face and sharp eyes, a retired tomb guard named Sergeant Hayes. When he heard what had happened, he didn't scold Bradley. Instead, he invited him to sit. "Do you know what it takes to become a tomb guard?" Hayes asked. Bradley shook his head. The sergeant leaned back and began to explain. "It's one of the hardest honors to earn. We train for months. Every movement you saw, the steps, the turns, the pause, must be perfect. We memorize every detail of this place. We learn the history of every war, every unknown soldier buried here. We even press our uniforms ourselves until not a single wrinkle is visible." Bradley listened closely. Hayes continued. "We don't do it for glory or fame. Most people don't even know our names. We do it to keep a promise, that no soldier, known or unknown, will ever be forgotten. Rain, snow, heat, we stay, because that's our duty. It's about respect, discipline, and love for those who gave their lives." There was a long silence after that. Bradley felt his eyes sting. "I didn't know," he whispered. Hayes nodded gently. "Now you do. And that's what matters. The real lesson in life is not to be perfect. It's to learn when you've made a mistake and grow from it." Bradley thanked him sincerely. Before leaving, Hayes shook his hand and said, "Share what you've learned. That's how respect spreads." Those words stayed with him. Before heading out, Bradley bought a small bouquet of white flowers from the nearby shop. He returned quietly to the tomb, waited until the area was less crowded, and placed the flowers near the marble stone. He didn't take photos, didn't make speeches. He just stood there for a moment, head bowed, whispering softly, "I'm sorry. And thank you." The wind blew gently, carrying the faint echo of the guard's steady steps. Bradley felt a strange peace wash over him. That night, when he got back to his hotel, he sat by the window for a long time, thinking about everything he had seen and heard. The city lights sparkled outside, but his heart was calm. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of meaning, something deeper than fun or adventure. A few days later, he returned home to New York, but he wasn't the same man who had left. The trip had changed him in a quiet but powerful way. He decided to share his story online, not to gain sympathy or attention, but to help others understand. He wrote about how he had disrespected something sacred, how the soldier's calm strength had humbled him, and how the experience had opened his eyes. He ended his post with a message that touched thousands of readers. Some lessons are taught by words, but the most powerful ones are taught by silence and respect. The tomb guard didn't shout at me. He didn't argue. He just stood there and strong, proud, and silent. And that silence spoke louder than anything I'd ever heard. The post went viral. Many veterans and military families commented, thanking him for admitting his mistake and spreading awareness. Teachers shared it with students, parents read it to their children, and people around the world were reminded of the importance of respect. Months later, Bradley returned to Washington again, this time bringing a small group of young people from his community. He wanted them to see what he had seen, not through videos or pictures, but in person. He told them, "When you stand there and hear nothing but those footsteps, you'll understand what real honor feels like." As he watched the tomb guard march once again, Bradley smiled quietly. He had come full circle, from an arrogant tourist to a man who understood the true meaning of respect. And though the world would soon move on, that lesson, the one taught by a single soldier's silence, stayed with him forever.